It seems like everywhere you turn these days, AI is the hot topic.
Yeah, for sure.
And, it really does feel like this frenzy almost,
Right.
where fortunes are being made left and right, and it's hard not to wonder who's actually cashing in on all of this. Like,
Absolutely.
beyond the hype, beyond the headlines, where is the real money going?
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to try to unpack in this deep dive today.
Right.
Um, we've got this really interesting collection of sources that kind of pulls back the curtain and shows us who the real winners are.
Exactly.
And some of them might be a little surprising. Some of them, are the obvious big players, but
But they're-
there are others that are kind of these hidden, parts of the machine.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, too, how many different types of companies are involved. It's not just like one sector that's benefiting from this whole AI boom.
Right, exactly.
There's just so many different facets to it, from hardware to software to, the cloud.
Yeah.
It's a really complex ecosystem.
All right, well, let's kind of break it down then.
Yeah.
Let's start with, I guess, the foundation.
Yeah, okay.
The absolute foundation of AI, which is the hardware.
Yeah.
And when we think about hardware for AI, like one name instantly comes to mind, right?
It does. NVIDIA.
NVIDIA.
They've really cemented themselves as the leader in this space.
Yeah, and what's so interesting to me about them is that, they weren't always associated with AI.
Yeah.
I mean, they kind of came from this world of graphics processing, right?
Right.
Like for gaming.
Yeah.
But they were smart enough to see where things were going and adapted their technology.
Right.
And now their chips are they're essential for almost every AI advancement that's happening.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the numbers, it's pretty staggering. Yeah. Their market cap went over $1 trillion last year in 2023.
Yeah.
And people are saying that their GPUs are like the most coveted chips in the entire tech world.
It's crazy.
It really is.
And their CEO, Jensen Huang, he said their chips are necessary for, quote, every AI model, every data center running these large language models.
Yeah, and just to break that down a little bit for our listeners, these large language models are, incredibly complex AI systems.
Yeah.
That are trained on just massive amounts of data, like text data primarily.
Yeah.
And this allows them to understand and generate human-like language.
Right.
You've got things like ChatGPT, Google's Bard.
Right.
These are all powered by large language models.
Yeah, and because those models are so complex, they require this massive amount of computing power.
Right.
And that's where NVIDIA's GPUs are so important.
Yeah, they're specifically well-suited for the kind of intense calculations that deep learning requires. Like, it's all about matrix multiplications and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So NVIDIA's GPUs are really good at handling that.
Yeah. And it's interesting, Jensen Huang himself, he owns about 4% of the company, which, if you do the math, is somewhere north of $40 billion.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
a lot of money.
It's an insane amount of money. And it really shows you that, he was in the right place.
Right.
At the right time with the right technology.
Absolutely. And the financial results really reflect that.
Yeah.
I mean, just looking at the second quarter of 2023.
Yeah.
Their total revenue went up by 101%.
Wow.
Year over year.
Year over year.
And even more impressive, their data center revenue. So that's specifically the part of their business that's tied to AI.
Right.
Went up by 171%.
Oh, my God.
To over $10 billion.
It's insane.
So, that kind of growth.
Yeah.
It's not just like a steady incline.
No.
It's exponential.
Right.
And AI is undeniably the driving force behind it.
So NVIDIA is obviously a huge player, but they're not the only ones in this game, right?
No, definitely not.
I mean, we are seeing some other companies trying to, to get in on this.
Yeah, for sure. You've got AMD.
Yeah.
They're making a big push with their MI300 AI accelerators, which are a very strong contender.
Okay.
And then you've got Intel, which, historically has been a dominant chip manufacturer.
Yeah.
They're struggling a little bit to keep up in this AI space.
Right.
But they're putting a lot of effort into catching up.
Okay.
So, those are kind of the traditional chip makers.
Yeah.
But what's also really interesting is that you're seeing these big tech companies actually starting to develop their own custom AI chips.
Right.
So Google has their TPUs, tensor processing units.
Right.
Amazon has their Trainium and Inferentia chips.
Right.
And they're doing this because they realize how important it is to have hardware.
Yeah.
That's specifically designed for their AI ambitions.
Okay. So that's the hardware side.
Yeah.
But when we talk about AI, it's the models themselves that are really capturing people's imaginations,
Yeah.
the stuff that feels like it's straight out of science fiction. And when you talk about AI models, the one name that everyone knows is OpenAI.
Absolutely. They've really become synonymous with this whole generative AI revolution with their GPT models and, of course, ChatGPT.
Yeah, ChatGPT, it's like everyone's heard of it,
Yeah.
and their story is kind of amazing, right?
Yeah.
They started as a nonprofit research lab,
That's right.
and now they're this multi-billion-dollar company.
It's really remarkable.
And, part of that is driven by, some huge investment.
Yeah, massive investment.
Microsoft put in $13 billion.
It's incredible.
And by the end of 2023, they were valued at around $80 billion.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling the amount of money that's flowing into this.
It really is.
And Sam Altman, their CEO, he's become this, really prominent voice in the AI world.
Absolutely. He's kind of like the spokesperson for this whole movement.
Yeah.
And one of his quotes that really stood out to me, he said that AI is the biggest platform shift in technology since the smartphone. And I think that really captures both the excitement and the apprehension
Right.
that a lot of people feel about this technology.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is powerful.
Right.
But OpenAI, they're not the only ones who are developing these powerful models.
No, there are definitely other players in the field.
Anthropic is another one that's making a lot of noise.
Yeah. And what's interesting about Anthropic is that they were actually founded by some former OpenAI researchers.
Oh, wow.
So there's that direct connection there.
Okay.
And they've also attracted significant investments, most notably $4 billion from Amazon and Google.
Wow.
And their AI assistant, Claude, is a direct competitor to ChatGPT.
Right.
So it's really interesting to see this kind of, back and forth between these companies.
Yeah, and it makes you realize that, to even play in this game,
Right.
you need to have just mountains of cash.
Yeah, it's incredibly expensive to
Yeah.
build and train these foundational models. We're
Yeah.
talking hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah.
So it's a huge barrier to entry for most companies.
It really is.
Only the companies with the deepest pockets can really afford to be in this game.
Okay, so we've talked about the hardware, the chips.
Right.
We've talked about the models themselves.
Yeah.
But none of this would be possible without the cloud.
Exactly.
Right.
The cloud is essential for all of this.
Yeah.
I mean, these AI models, they need somewhere to live.
Right.
They need somewhere to run.
Yeah.
And that's where the big cloud providers come in.
Okay, so who are we talking about here?
Well, you've got the big three, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and Amazon Web Services.
AWS.
AWS, yeah.
And these companies are making billions of dollars.
Oh, absolutely.
From AI, just from providing the computing power.
Yeah, they're essentially charging rent for all of these AI models to live and run on their servers.
Right, they're like the landlords of the AI world.
Exactly.
And it seems like Microsoft, in particular, is going all in on AI.
They are, yeah.
Not just with the cloud, but also with, integrating AI into all their other products.
Yeah, they've got that close partnership with OpenAI.
Right.
They're putting AI into Office, into Windows.
Yeah.
They're really making it a core part of their entire business.
And it seems to be working for them because their market cap went over $3 trillion.
Yeah, earlier this year.
At the beginning of 2024.
It's incredible.
So, I mean, they're definitely reaping the rewards.
Yeah, and their CEO, Satya Nadella, he had a really interesting analogy.
Yeah.
He said that AI is the new electricity and cloud is the generator that powers it all.
I like that.
Yeah, it's a really good way to think about it.
Yeah. Okay, so what about Google?
Right?
I mean, they were, kind of pioneers in AI research.
Absolutely.
But they were a little bit slower, it seems, to really embrace this generative AI stuff.
Yeah, they were definitely more cautious at first.
Yeah.
And I think part of that was because they were worried about what it would mean for their core search business.
Right.
If people can just get answers from AI, why would they need to use Google Search?
Yeah.
So they had to be careful about how they approached it.
Right.
But they've since made significant investments in their own AI models, the Gemini models,
Yeah.
and their cloud AI services.
Yeah.
So they're definitely making moves to stay competitive.
And then there's Amazon.
Right.
What's their approach been?
Well, Amazon's approach with AWS is interesting.
Yeah.
It seems almost like they're Switzerland,
Okay.
They're not really picking sides.
Right.
They're just providing the platform
Yeah.
and letting everyone else fight it out.
Yeah.
One of the AWS executives, who was quoted anonymously, said, "We don't need to pick winners. We make money when startups train their models, when they deploy them, and when they scale.
Right. So they're going to make money no matter who comes out on top.
Exactly. They're kind of like the arms dealers in this
Yeah.
AI arms race.
Yeah.
They're selling the weapons to everyone.
Okay. So we've talked about the big players, but there's also this whole world of startups
Oh, absolutely.
that are getting in on this AI action.
Yeah, the venture capital money is just pouring into AI startups.
It's crazy, right?
It's amazing. Over $40 billion was invested in 2023 alone.
Yeah, and it seems like every week there's another AI startup that's become a unicorn.
Right, a unicorn meaning a company valued at over $1 billion.
Yeah.
And a lot of these companies are achieving these valuations before they've even generated substantial revenue.
It's wild.
It is.
And it seems like the same VC firms are behind a lot of these investments.
Yeah, the usual suspects.
Sequoia Capital,
Right.
Andreessen Horowitz,
Yep.
Tiger Global Management.
They're all placing big bets on the future of AI.
Yeah, it's almost like the traditional rules of startup valuation have been thrown out the window.
Yeah, I think Sarah Gual from Conviction put it really well.
Yeah.
She said that investors are often valuing these AI startups based on what she calls option value, meaning the potential for transformative impact, rather than focusing solely on current earnings.
Okay.
So it's a much more speculative investment landscape.
Yeah, and it's almost like there's this feedback loop.
Absolutely.
You know, the more hype there is around AI, the
Right.
more investment pours in,
Yeah.
which creates even more hype.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way.
Yeah. And I guess for a startup, it makes sense to, to jump on that AI bandwagon.
Right.
Because that's where the money is.
Exactly.
So I guess they're kind of incentivized to, to present themselves as an AI company,
Just so-
even if maybe they're not, doing anything particularly groundbreaking.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about the hardware makers.
Yeah.
The model makers.
The cloud providers.
The investors.
Yep.
But it's not just those big names that are profiting from this, right?
No, definitely not.
There's this whole ecosystem.
Yeah, whole network of companies.
Of smaller companies that are also doing very well.
Right, they're kind of like the behind-the-scenes players.
Yeah.
They're not the stars of the show,
Yeah.
but they're essential to making it all work.
Okay, so who are we talking about here?
Well, for one, you've got the data providers.
Okay.
So these are the companies that provide the labeled data that AI models need to train on.
Right. I didn't really think about that before, but I mean, these models need a ton of data.
Oh, they need massive
Okay.
amounts of data.
Yeah.
And it has to be labeled.
Okay.
So you need humans to go in and actually tag all of this data.
Yeah.
And that's what these data providers do.
Okay.
Companies like Scale AI and Surge AI have built big businesses around this.
Wow.
Scale AI, for example, was valued at over $7 billion in 2023.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so it just shows you how important this data labeling is.
Okay.
And then you've also got the API middleware companies.
API middleware. Okay, now break that down for me.
So basically, this is the software that allows different AI components and applications to talk to each other.
Okay.
You know, it's kind of like the plumbing that connects everything together. Companies like Weights and Biases provide the tools and platforms that developers use to build, track, and deploy AI models.
Okay.
And they're doing really well. Weights and Biases, for example, was valued at $4.5 billion in 2023.
Wow.
So again, you know, it's this kind of behind-the-scenes infrastructure that's really crucial to the whole AI ecosystem.
Okay, so there's the data providers, the API middleware companies.
Right.
What else?
Well, we can't forget about the people who are actually building all of this.
Yeah.
The AI researchers and engineers.
Yeah.
They're in incredibly high demand right now,
Okay.
and their salaries have gone through the roof.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Top AI talent at leading AI labs can easily earn over $1 million a year.
It's insane.
It is.
And Clement DeLange, who's the CEO of Hugging Face, he said that having a PhD in machine learning is basically like a license to print money right now.
Yeah, it's a really hot skill to have.
Okay, so it's not just the companies, it's the individuals too.
Right. The talent is really valuable in this field.
Okay, so we've talked about, all these different players who are profiting from AI, but there's another aspect to this that we need to talk about.
Okay, what's that?
And that's the role of influencers and the media in shaping the narrative around AI.
Right, the hype machine.
Yeah, and how that hype itself is being monetized.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've got all these tech influencers on Twitter, on YouTube.
Right.
They're generating a lot of income from sponsorships.
Yeah, often from the very companies that they're talking about.
Right.
So it could be hard to distinguish between what's genuine analysis
Yeah.
and what's just paid promotion.
Yeah, it's tricky.
And there's definitely an incentive to be positive about AI.
Okay.
If you're critical, you might get shut out of opportunities.
Right.
You might not get invited to the conferences.
Yeah.
You might not get access to the latest technology.
So it's kind of I guess, a conflict of interest almost?
Yeah,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
And then you also got the big industry conferences, which are essentially giant marketing events
Right.
with companies paying a lot of money to be sponsors.
Yeah.
And these conferences definitely contribute to the hype cycle.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk about, what this means for everyday people,
Okay.
for business owners, for
Yeah.
consumers. Like, where are the real opportunities beyond all the hype?
Right. Where's the actual value?
Yeah.
Well, for businesses, I think the most promising areas are in what we call vertical AI applications.
Okay. What are those?
These are AI solutions that are tailored to specific industries.
Okay.
So, for example, you've got Viz.ai in healthcare.
Okay.
They use AI to analyze medical images.
Okay.
And then you've got Harvey in the legal field.
Okay.
They use AI for legal research.
Okay.
So these are companies that are using AI to solve real-world problems in specific industries.
Okay.
And that's where I think a lot of the value is.
Okay.
It's not about trying to build the next ChatGPT.
Right.
It's about using AI to make existing businesses better,
Yeah.
more efficient,
Yeah.
more effective.
So practical applications.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's also a growing need for AI implementation services.
Okay.
So these are companies that help businesses actually integrate AI into their workflows.
Okay.
Because it's one thing to have the technology.
Right.
It's another thing to actually use it effectively.
Right.
So these implementation services are really important.
Okay.
And then finally, there are what I call efficiency plays.
Okay.
These are ways that businesses can use AI to streamline their operations, to optimize pricing,
Right.
to improve customer service,
Yeah.
to enhance logistics.
Yeah.
So, there are a lot of ways that businesses can use AI to just become more efficient.
Okay.
And that's where I think a lot of the near-term value is.
So it's about finding those concrete business challenges
Exactly.
that AI can help to solve.
Right.
Matthew Turk, who's from For Smart Capital, said that, it's often about using AI to solve those concrete problems.
Right.
Rather than trying to chase the absolute cutting edge.
Yeah. Don't get caught up in the hype.
Right.
Focus on what AI can do for your business today.
Okay, so that's for businesses.
Yeah.
What about for us as consumers?
Right.
What should we be looking out for?
Well, I think the first thing to be aware of is that you're going to see a lot of companies using AI as a justification for raising prices.
Okay.
So you'll see AI-powered features added to products and services.
Yeah.
And then the price will go up.
Right.
And it's not always clear that those AI features are actually adding that much value.
Right. It's just a marketing ploy almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
So be wary of that.
Okay.
The other thing to be aware of is data privacy.
Yeah.
A lot of these free AI tools, they're using our interactions as training data.
Oh, wow.
So they're learning from us.
Yeah.
And they're using that data to improve their models.
Okay.
So it's something to be mindful of.
Right.
How much you're willing to share in exchange for using these free tools.
Right.
But there are also some genuine benefits for consumers.
Okay.
There are tools like GitHub Copilot, which can help developers write code more efficiently.
Right.
There are image generation platforms that can be really useful for creative tasks.
Yeah.
So it's about finding the tools that actually provide real value for you.
Okay, so it's a mixed bag for consumers.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment.
Okay.
There are opportunities and there are risks.
So looking ahead then, is all of this whole AI gold rush,
Right?
is it sustainable?
That's the big question, isn't it? And
Yeah.
there's some reasons to be skeptical.
Okay.
The cost of training and running these advanced AI models is just astronomical.
Yeah.
I mean, just to give you an idea, OpenAI is reportedly spending over $700,000 a day just to run ChatGPT.
Oh my gosh.
So that's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And it's not clear that these companies have figured out how to make this sustainable. They're relying on a lot of investor funding.
Right.
And that funding might not always be there.
Especially if, the economy takes a downturn or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think there's a risk that this whole AI bubble could burst.
Yeah. It's not a given that it's just going to keep going up and up and up.
No, definitely not.
Okay, well, I think this has been a really fascinating look at the AI landscape.
Yeah.
And, I think one of the key takeaways for me is that while there's a lot of hype around AI
Absolutely.
and a lot of money flowing into it,
Right?
a lot of the benefits are concentrated among a relatively small number of players.
Yeah, the hardware manufacturers, the cloud providers, the big AI labs,
Right.
they're the ones who are really reaping the rewards right now.
Yeah. And, for businesses that are looking to get in on this,
Right.
it seems like the real opportunity is in finding those practical applications,
Absolutely.
those concrete business problems that AI can solve.
Right.
Don't try to be the next OpenAI. Find a way to use AI to make your business better.
Right.
So, yeah, I think that's a really important message.
Yeah, focus on the value.
Okay, well, I think that's a good place to wrap up for today.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave you with this thought.
Yeah.
We've talked about all this investment,
Right.
all this focus on these, specific areas of AI.
Right.
What about the things that we're not talking about?
Yeah.
What are the less hyped areas of AI
Right.
that could be really significant in the years to come?
It's a good question.
Yeah, and what are the unexpected ripple effects that all of this, this concentration of wealth
Yeah.
might have on other industries,
Yeah.
on society as a whole?
Yeah, something to think about.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right, well, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And we'll see you next time.
See